It wasn't the shiv fights, the iron bars, or the clatter of prison life that broke him, it was the letter. James Dorsey had already done 7 years of a 15-year sentence at Grayson Correctional Facility for armed robbery. He'd adjusted to the rhythm of prison life, meals at the same time, the same worn books, the same murmurs behind steel doors. For the most part, he kept his head down. He didn't cause trouble, and the guards left him alone. His wife, Elaine, had stood by him through it all. They wrote each other weekly. She visited when she could, though less often lately. Still, James clung to the belief that when he got out, they'd start over. Maybe move somewhere new. Leave the past behind. That hope died the day he got the letter. It wasn't from Elaine. It came from a man named Donald Graves, a quiet, polite inmate 2 cells down who had struck up a slow, uneasy friendship with James over the years. Donald had been released a few weeks earlier. Now, in careful cursive on prison-issue paper, he wrote, "James, I debated whether to tell you this, but I feel you have a right to know. Your wife, she's been seeing someone. A younger guy. I've seen them together more than once. I didn't want to believe it at first, but it seems serious. I'm sorry. Donald." James read the letter 3 times. His hands trembled. He didn't eat that day. Didn't talk. That night, he sat in his bunk in silence, eyes fixed on the ceiling, heart thudding like a war drum in his chest. He tried to dismiss it as gossip. Rumor. Someone trying to get under his skin. But the seed had been planted. Over the next week, he grew restless. Snapped at guards. Started picking fights in the yard. Then came the final nail, a visit from his cousin, Ray. Ray was the only family James had left outside of Elaine. And when he showed up on a rainy afternoon with a strange look in his eyes, James knew. "I didn't want to believe it, man," Ray said, lowering his voice. "But it's true." He slid a few small photos across the plastic table. They were grainy, taken from a distance. But clear enough. Elaine. Holding hands with a man half James's age. Laughing. Leaning in close. At a cafe James used to take her to. James stared at the images, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. Something inside him snapped, not with rage, not with heartbreak, but with cold determination. "She's mine," he whispered. Ray looked uneasy. "James, don't do anything stupid." But it was too late. James wasn't going to sit in a cell while someone else lived the life that was supposed to be his. Over the next few weeks, James watched. Listened. Waited. Grayson Correctional was undergoing minor renovations, a new wing being added to the north side. Construction debris was hauled out twice a week. Workers moved back and forth through a temporary service gate, often distracted, often careless. James saw his opportunity. On the night of October 12, during the tail end of a storm, James feigned a medical issue and was temporarily moved to the infirmary wing, closer to the construction area. At 3:37 a.m. As rain drizzled over the facility, he slipped out through an unsecured maintenance hallway, climbed into a half-full debris bin scheduled for early morning removal, and buried himself under broken drywall, splintered wood, and garbage bags. At dawn, the bin was loaded onto a truck and hauled off. By the time the prison noticed he was gone, James Dorsey was already 30 miles away, walking along a state highway in a stolen construction jacket, face smeared with dirt, eyes burning with betrayal. He was going home. And nothing, not gates, not warnings, not mercy, was going to stop him. Elaine Dorsey didn't sleep well the night her husband escaped. She couldn't explain why. No news had broken yet, no phone calls, no alerts. But around 3 a.m. she jolted awake, heart racing, skin clammy, eyes darting to the bedroom window. The wind rattled the glass. Nothing was there. She told herself it was just a nightmare. Nothing more. Downstairs, the house was quiet, too quiet for someone living with a secret. Elaine had changed over the last few years. At first, she'd visited James regularly, wrote long letters, saved his favorite shows on their DVR. She held out hope that they could rebuild. But over time, reality settled in. Loneliness. Distance. The loss of time and years. Then came Travis. He was 26, 10 years younger than Elaine, and worked part-time at the auto shop where she got her oil changed. Their flirtation started with banter and harmless jokes. But it didn't stay that way. By summer, he was spending nights at her house. Elaine kept telling herself it wasn't serious. That she still loved James. That this was just something temporary, something to make the silence go away. But it was more than that. Travis brought her laughter, warmth, a sense of youth she thought she'd lost. For the first time in years, she felt seen again. Still, she never told James. And she never believed he would find out. That belief shattered on the afternoon of October 13th. Elaine was at work when two local detectives appeared in the front office of the middle school where she worked as a secretary. Their expressions were serious, grim. One of them, Detective Rachel Hannigan, gently asked if they could speak in private. They sat in the break room. The coffee pot hummed behind them. "Elaine," Hannigan began, "we're here because we have reason to believe your husband, James Dorsey, escaped from Grayson Correctional early this morning." Elaine's world shifted. She blinked. "Excuse me?" Hannigan nodded. "The prison is still investigating how, but he's gone. The last confirmed sighting was several hours ago." Elaine's voice cracked. "You think he's coming here?" "We believe it's a possibility," the detective said carefully. "We also have information suggesting he may have recently learned about your relationship with another man. We have to consider that he could be angry, and dangerous." Elaine's hands trembled. They offered her protection, a patrol car stationed nearby, a temporary relocation to a motel, even witness protection options through the Department of Corrections. But she refused. "No," she said firmly. "He's not going to hurt me." Hannigan pressed. "Elaine, you need to understand, he escaped a maximum security prison. That's not the act of a man thinking clearly." "I know James," she replied. "He wouldn't. I can talk to him. I can calm him down." The detectives exchanged uneasy glances. "If you change your mind," Hannigan said, "call us. Immediately. We'll respond fast. Don't wait." Elaine nodded but didn't meet their eyes. That night, she went home early. She turned on all the lights, locked every door and window, and kept checking the front step every 10 minutes, telling herself she was just being cautious. She didn't call Travis. Didn't want to pull him into the mess. By midnight, the house was quiet again. Elaine curled up on the couch, her phone clutched in her hand, the TV playing reruns no one was watching. Outside, the street was dark. A few houses down, a dog barked. Then stopped. And the wind carried a faint sound, one she didn't notice until it was too late. The creak of a fence gate swinging open. The screen door didn't make a sound. James Dorsey had always been good with locks, a skill that helped land him behind bars in the first place. The back latch on Elaine's kitchen door was still the same flimsy one he'd installed 8 years ago. One flick of a screwdriver, and he was inside. The house smelled like lavender and lemon floor cleaner. His eyes adjusted to the soft glow from the television. The living room looked familiar, but something felt wrong. A throw blanket he didn't recognize. A pair of men's boots near the door. A lighter on the coffee table, not his brand. His pulse quickened. He moved silently through the hallway, passing the framed wedding photo that still hung near the stairs. In it, Elaine smiled in a way she hadn't in years. He paused, stared at it for a long moment, then kept walking. In the living room, he saw her. Elaine had fallen asleep on the couch, the remote loosely cradled in her hand, a muted infomercial flashing across the screen. Her breathing was soft, even. Peaceful. James's hand clenched around the handle in his coat pocket. He stood there, watching her sleep, his thoughts racing. Images of her with the younger man. The betrayal. The laughter in the photos. All of it swirled inside him like a storm that had no exit. She stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on the figure in the dark. She gasped. James. He stepped forward. Elaine sat upright, panic rising in her chest. You're not supposed to be here. James's voice was calm. Too calm. So it's true. Elaine stood quickly, backing toward the wall. Listen to me, I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you'd understand. You thought I'd understand? His voice cracked. You thought I'd understand that my wife was sleeping with some punk while I rotted in a cell? Tears welled in her eyes. James, please. You're angry. I get it. But we can talk about this. I'll help you. I'll help you turn yourself in. I gave you everything I had left, he whispered. And you gave me this. He pulled the knife from his coat. Elaine's breath hitched. James, no. But it was too late. He lunged. The blade flashed under the flickering light. Elaine screamed, tried to run, but stumbled backward over the coffee table. She hit the floor hard, crying out in pain. James was on her in seconds, rage eclipsing everything else. Neighbors would later describe the sounds as animalistic, thuds, crashes, and a scream that cut through the night like shattered glass. Then, silence. It was 12:42 a.m. when the first 911 call came in. The woman next door had heard everything. Officers were dispatched immediately. By the time they arrived, Elaine was gone. She lay motionless on the living room floor, her blood soaking into the beige rug, her lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. The knife was still in the room, smeared with prints. Footprints tracked across the hardwood. James Dorsey was already gone. But he hadn't gone far. The police cordoned off the scene within minutes. Yellow tape fluttered in the early morning breeze. Officers moved with grim efficiency as forensic technicians began their work inside the now infamous Dorsey residence. Blood pooled beneath the couch, streaks ran along the floor, a chaotic story of struggle etched into every surface. Detective Rachel Hannigan arrived at 1:07 a.m. She had warned Elaine. Had offered protection. Now she stood on the same porch where that warning had been refused, staring into a scene soaked in the very thing she tried to prevent. She didn't stand a chance, one officer said quietly, removing his gloves. Hannigan didn't answer. Inside, the crime scene unit collected evidence with clinical precision. The knife, found on the floor, handle smeared with partial fingerprints. The rug, soaked with blood, later confirmed to contain DNA matching James Dorsey. Footprints, 2 sets, one belonging to Elaine, the other to a man wearing work boots. James's exact size. A broken frame near the staircase bore traces of skin cells and blood, likely from where Elaine had fallen or tried to brace herself. Strands of hair caught in a jagged picture frame confirmed the violent struggle. There were no signs of forced entry. He knew how to get in, Hannigan said. He planned this. By sunrise, a full-scale manhunt was underway. State troopers, K-9 units, and U.S. Marshals were mobilized. Every highway out of town was monitored. Helicopters circled wooded areas on the town's edge. Local news outlets ran the story on every station: escaped inmate kills wife, manhunt underway. James Dorsey had become the most wanted man in the state. A neighbor reported seeing someone matching his description heading toward the railroad tracks shortly after midnight, carrying what looked like a backpack. Officers scoured the area, turning up nothing but a discarded coat and muddy footprints leading toward a storm culvert. Another tip came from a truck stop 12 miles north. A clerk there remembered a ragged man with wild eyes, who came in asking for cigarettes and an energy drink, paying with crumpled bills. He had dirt on his face. Sweat on his collar. He was breathing like a man on the run. The clerk recognized him the moment the news alert pinged his phone. James had already disappeared into the woods behind the gas station by the time officers arrived. It didn't last long. At 9:46 a.m. Less than 9 hours after the murder, a sheriff's deputy spotted movement near an abandoned barn on a rural property outside town. When backup arrived, they surrounded the building. A tense standoff followed, but James didn't resist. He stepped out, hands raised, shirt stained with dried blood, eyes hollow. There was no remorse. No fear. Just a chilling calm. "I did what I had to do," he said. He was cuffed, searched, and placed in the back of a squad car. The hunt was over. But the reckoning was just beginning. The room was cold. Sterile. Quiet. James Dorsey sat at the metal table, hands cuffed, his knuckles still raw. He stared straight ahead, unblinking, as if the white cinderblock walls were whispering to him. 2 paper cups of coffee sat untouched. One of them still steamed faintly. Detective Rachel Hannigan entered just before noon. She dropped a thick manila file on the table and pulled out a chair opposite him. No words at first, just the slow opening of the file, the careful slide of a photograph across the table. Elaine's face. Peaceful. Pale. Lifeless. James didn't look away. "She was alive when we warned her," Hannigan said flatly. "She believed you wouldn't hurt her." His eyes flicked to her, then back to the photo. "She was wrong," he said. There was no emotion in his voice. Just fact. The recording device on the table blinked red. Hannigan pressed the button. "Let's start at the beginning," she said. "Tell me how you got out." James leaned back. Construction crew. Trash bin. Waited till the shift changed. Took a jacket from one of the lockers, laid low in the debris. They wheeled me out with the garbage. He almost smiled. Nobody even checked. And then? I walked. Hitched a ride near Ridge Creek. Trucker didn't ask questions, gave me a sandwich, dropped me near town. I cut through the woods. I know those woods. Why not run further? Hannigan asked. James looked her dead in the eye. Because she was the reason. He gave a full confession. No hesitation. No remorse. He described arriving at the house. Sneaking in. Seeing her asleep on the couch. I watched her breathe for 5 minutes, he said. She looked peaceful. Like nothing had ever happened. Like she'd just moved on. His jaw clenched. That's what killed me. She moved on. He spoke of the confrontation, her waking, trying to explain, offering help. She thought I could be reasoned with, he said. But she didn't know what it felt like. To rot behind bars while she gave herself to someone else. And then, without pause, he described pulling the knife. She begged, he added. She cried. Said she was sorry. He tilted his head, as if remembering something trivial. But sorry doesn't put 7 years back in your hands. Hannigan sat in silence, letting the words settle. You murdered your wife, she said finally. In cold blood. You planned it. You bought the weapon in advance. You escaped with the intent to kill. James didn't flinch. She was mine, he said simply. It was the last thing he said before they led him away. That afternoon, formal charges were filed: escape from a correctional facility, first-degree murder, breaking and entering, premeditated homicide with a deadly weapon. Bail was denied. James Dorsey would never walk free again. The trial began 3 months later. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery, their pens and cameras capturing every angle of the man who'd turned a small-town scandal into a brutal, headline-grabbing murder. Outside, protesters held signs, some demanding life without parole, others condemning the prison system for its failure to prevent the escape. But inside the courtroom, there was no chaos. Just the slow, deliberate unraveling of a tragedy everyone already knew the ending to. James Dorsey sat at the defense table with no family behind him. His cousin Ray, the man who'd brought him the damning photos, didn't attend. No one did. James never looked back anyway. He showed no emotion when the charges were read aloud. No change in expression when the prosecution played his full-taped confession for the jury. District Attorney Malcolm Reese was a seasoned prosecutor, gray-templed and clinical in tone. He didn't grandstand. He didn't need to. This was not a crime of passion, he told the jury. This was a calculated, premeditated execution by a man who believed his wife was his property, not a person. When he learned she had moved on, he didn't grieve. He hunted. And he killed. The evidence spoke for itself. The photos of Elaine's body. The blood-stained knife, with James's fingerprints. The DNA trail. The prison break route. The clerk's eyewitness account from the gas station. The interrogation video, played in full, James recounting the murder without remorse, voice steady, face cold. Then came the testimony from the neighbor who'd called 911. She screamed once. Just once. Then it was quiet. That kind of quiet that makes your heart stop. And finally, Detective Hannigan took the stand. She told the court about the warning they gave Elaine. The way she refused protection. The way she tried to believe in James one last time. She thought she could calm him, Hannigan said. But James Dorsey didn't come back for closure. He came back for revenge. The defense had little to stand on. Public defender Elaine Morris, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s, could only argue for mitigation. Yes, he escaped. Yes, he killed his wife. But Mr. Dorsey is not a psychopath. He is a broken man, one who felt abandoned and humiliated. He reacted with rage, not strategy. His actions were unforgivable, but not incomprehensible. But the jury wasn't moved. They deliberated for only 6 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. No appeals were filed. James stood when the sentence was read. He did not speak. He did not flinch. He simply turned, placed his hands behind his back, and was led away. There was no final statement. No apology. No goodbye. Travis, the man Elaine had been seeing, left town quietly after the funeral. He didn't attend the trial. Didn't speak to the press. No one's seen him since. The Dorsey house still stands on Willow Lane. But no one lives there now. The curtains are drawn. The mailbox is sealed shut. The grass grows too high in the front yard, and the porch paint is peeling in long, tired strips. Most nights, the porch light flickers from a faulty motion sensor, casting brief, ghost-like shadows across the steps where police once stood with warnings that came too late. A single flower pot remains on the railing. Inside it, someone placed a small ceramic urn. Elaine's ashes. Her sister, who collected them after the trial, chose to leave part of her there, not out of sentiment, but as a statement. This is where her life ended. This is where her memory begins. The town of Fairburn hasn't forgotten. Not the teachers who worked with Elaine. Not the students who used to say hello every morning at the school's front office. Not the neighbors who heard the scream. For a long time, residents avoided even driving past the house. But time, as it always does, softened the edges. The story faded from headlines and became something more sinister, a cautionary tale passed down in whispers. Don't let your past in the front door. When a man says he'll kill for love, believe him. You hear about that house on Willow Lane? Detective Rachel Hennigan kept the case file on a shelf in her office long after it closed. She often thought about Elaine, about that moment in the school break room when she tried, one last time, to protect her. She wondered whether she could have pushed harder. Said more. Insisted. But grief is a quiet thing. And guilt, even quieter. Sometimes she drives by the old house, slowing at the corner just long enough to see the outline of the porch. The urn's still there. No one's dared to move it. As for James Dorsey, he now resides in a maximum security prison 3 states away. He works in laundry. Speaks to no one. Has no visitors. When asked during a psychiatric interview whether he regrets what he did, his only response was, "She knew who I was." No parole. No commutation. No hope. Just bars and concrete, and a name etched forever in the registry of the damned. There's no ending to this story that feels satisfying. No moral tidy enough to stitch over the wound. Elaine is gone. Her life, her laughter, her future, stolen in one night by the man who once swore to protect her. James is alive, but empty, a man whose name is now met with silence, shame, or spit. And the town? It breathes. It heals. But it never forgets. Because some tragedies don't fade. They settle into the soil. And bloom only when no one is watching.